Hi, my name is Marcy Comer. I am CMO at a company called EagleView, and I'm really thrilled to spend some time with you guys today talking about tapping into the power of mobile's massive audience. And I'm joined today with 3 experts on the topic. I don't proclaim to be an expert anymore in this, so I'm going to be asking some newbie questions. Well, I'm an oldie asking newbie questions. And these 3 are really prepared to answer any questions that you guys might have, so feel free to interrupt and ask a question at will. I'm really excited. All right, so I wanted to start out by sharing some stats that kind of blew my mind when I was preparing for this. So mobile ad spending increased 23% year over year, topping $295 billion in spend. I had not realized that we'd reached that level, but I guess we should brace ourselves because they're predicting it to go to $350 billion in the next year. And so the question is why? Must be seeing some success, and then how are people deriving that success? And that's exactly something that we aim to answer today. So I am joined by Megan Martino. She's head of demand at AppLovin. Asif Rahman, he's VP of Digital Analytics and Audience at AccuWeather. And Billy Nguyen, who's a CMO at Curio. Welcome. Thank you. All right, so we're going to start it off. I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then, but maybe with like a little icebreaker to kick it off. Does that sound good? So if each of you would tell me about your role and an acute challenge your company is facing, followed by if you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be? All right, Megan, you're up.
Hi, everyone. So I am the head of demand at the AppLovin Exchange. As many of you may or may not know, AppLovin recently has gone through a bunch of acquisitions, one of which being MoPub from Twitter, which was where I was previously. And I've been on the demand side of the business working with DSPs and agencies and advertisers to help them understand how they can take advantage of mobile, as it has been such a growing channel for many years now, and one that's often underutilized by many advertisers. And the acute challenge that I am facing right now is after going through the acquisition and the complete migration of MoPub into AppLovin Exchange, it's about looking at our partners, the efficiency of the platform, the efficiency of the space that we're in, and figuring out where we can invest our resources, because they're limited, and how do we think about the next 6 months to 3 years from now, and where do we want to be. So efficiency planning and thinking about costs and the operating costs therein. And if I could be an expert, in one thing I would say, it would be in language, or the ability to speak many, many languages. It's not something that I do today, and I've always enjoyed being able to connect with people, and I feel like that would bring a lot of new adventures for me.
I think that's a solid choice.
Yeah.
Okay, Asif, you're up.
All right, Asif Rahman, Vice President, Analytics and Audience at AccuWeather. And so my role entails on the analytics front, digital analytics practice, end-to-end, including measurement strategy, data visualization, data science, analytics, the entire gamut. And then on the audience side is user acquisition across desktop, mobile apps, ASO, SEO, push notification strategies, paid and organic spend. A acute challenge, it requires a little bit of context of AccuWeather. So we are, there's 2 facets to an AccuWeather audience. One of which is transactional. You open the app, you check the weather. Hopefully you check it 10 times a day, if not more, highly suggested. Then the other aspect is we're a media and a publisher, right? We publish original content across linear, digital. You come to us to consume content, whether it's video, whether it's articles. So we are a utility, we're also a publisher, right? So we have 2 different types of audiences. And, look, one thing that's happening in the marketplace, and all of that takes a lot of effort behind the scenes. We're a dynamic app, hundreds and thousands of data sources back and forth in real time, updating the app, right? So it's cost to maintain, it's cost to create this content, right? And we do all of that and provide a free service. The app is still free for the most part. Yes, you can subscribe to a premium service and do all of that. So all of that effort in real time, producing content, doing the forecast, over 100 meteorologists, it's a lot of investment that we provide for free. And given the current ad ecosystem, and we are an ad-supported platform to be able to provide that service for free, given the current ad ecosystem, that's causing some challenges in ad monetization for us, right? And most publishers are feeling that the value of a publisher's audience has been declining, right? So that's one major challenge for us that we're hyper-focused on. And sorry, that was a long answer, but I felt like, they needed a little bit of context of, AccuWeather, because a lot of people just think, hey, it's a weather app, right? You open it, you get the weather, and that's it. It's not. It's more than that. One thing I could be an expert in overnight, being a dad. I'm 9 years in, and then I feel like I'm still figuring out how to just do better at it every single day. That's it.
Yeah, fun fact for the audience, we have 2 special guests in the audience, and it's 2 of our children. So my 7-year-old and your 8-year-old, right?
9-year-old.
9-year-old, right there. We figured we'd bring Zoom in person, but that's the way it is. Okay, Billy, tell us about you.
Sure. So Billy, CMO of Curio. Curio is a premium audio app for major publications and thought leaders like Gillian Anderson, Wall Street Journal, et cetera. And obviously, I kind of do all things marketing, especially in this case, user acquisition, branding, et cetera, for the app. And actually, before Curio, a little bit of background in terms of what we're talking about today. I really got my footing in the industry about a decade ago at Twitter, where actually Megan and I crossed paths via MoPub. And so I was part of the team that actually was working on the integration of MoPub into Twitter via the Twitter audience platform. And so really interesting times. From there, I went on to an ad tech company called FeedMob, leading operations there before now becoming CMO. So really fascinating. In terms of challenges, actually really similar. And actually, I wanted to let the audience know I'm coming from the advertiser perspective. So the buy side, the person who's actually looking at the most efficient channels to go across. And actually, similar to Asif, we're very challenged in that aspect now because of data issues. So it's always been about finding the right channels and getting the maximum efficiency out of that. And more so now than ever. And so really big challenge there. And in terms of what I would become, I just have to keep leaning on becoming a survivalist. I really love the idea that we're all on the grid, New York. Love it to death, but I also love the idea that you can take me out in the middle of anywhere and I can survive on my own. And I'd love to do that someday.
But not today, I guess. So
Not
I'm not
today.
going with
Today
you.
we're here. And thank you everyone for coming.
So if I have it straight in my mind, we have a platform for advertising, right? Exchange, a publisher, and an advertiser on the panel. So any question that you have, you can get answered today by one of these 3 fine experts. All right, so to kick it off, Megan, I would love to understand sort of what your role is specifically in the app industry.
Yeah, so my role specifically is in making sure we can get DSPs to plug in and scale against the world's largest supply of mobile in-app. AppLovin also owns Max, which is a mediation platform, and so we provide the mediation for monetization for the majority of the apps that do monetize. And so we have a tremendous footprint in terms of mediation as an ad server in the mobile ecosystem. And a big part of that is making sure we have demand from the programmatic buyers, namely Omni DSPs and performance DSPs that really scale against those inventory sources and audiences. And so for us right now, tactically, it's really just ensuring that all of our partners that we need to be connected with, we are, and we're connected with them in a way that truly supports the scalability of their business. And so ultimately, it's about influencing upper funnel. We want to get to advertisers who don't understand the space, agencies who may not be, really putting effort into mobile, as if historically it's a little bit more of a barrier to entry. And so really focusing and building out their ability to get into mobile and helping advertisers that do it really well find other ways to incorporate tactics into their strategy.
So if you are an app marketer, what do you think is your biggest opportunity today?
I think very similar to what Billy started to say, in that For us, because of where we sit, operational efficiencies is become front and center in transparency and being able to know where is this impression coming from? How many other people are taking a piece of it? Are they adding value? Are they adding duplication? Because there's a lot of just hard costs associated with listening to programmatic. I think we always boast that we have like 80 billion impression requests a day or 1 billion. There's just so much scale. And there's so many ways a publisher can work with demand sources, and advertisers may not understand that when they buy through a certain partner, they're also seeing that exact same user and impression through another partner duplicated 3, 4, 10 times. And so I think SPO, as it's becoming more challenging, more expensive to find users, knowing that when you find those users, you're doing it operationally at a way to provide scalable revenue balance for you to actually do it for a long time.
Okay, acronym check. SPO.
Yeah. Supply path optimization.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to write that down later. All right, Asif, tell us about your role at AccuWeather.
Again, as I highlighted earlier, it's my role really is informing the business, right, from the analytics perspective. It is measuring its measurement strategies, its data visualization, data science, data engineering, end-to-end analytics, and a lot of that. The best part is I also help lead acquisition, so I can use my left brain to support my right brain. And then on the other side, it's user engagement and acquisition, right? With all the challenges and the challenges that I mentioned earlier, it's really about, look, times have changed, right? We really have to be very, very surgical about where we spend our money and where we spend those hard dollars and resources. So it's extremely critical to be able to use the data and the insights and the analytics and the science behind it to surgically go after acquisition, to keep acquisition costs low, and ensure that we're measuring things properly and measuring the right things, right? So I think we're going to chat a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we are. All right, you're up, Billy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to branch off what I said earlier, for me, what I'm doing at Curio is I think of it like being a growth operator as opposed to just a standard CMO, which is quite broad. And what I mean by growth operations is like we're thinking about, we're still quite early stage, right? So what we're always thinking about is our users, like just user obsession. What is their experience from the very beginning, especially like the ad that they see? Like how does that speak to them? Is it the right channel? What is our CAC? What is our LTV? All of these things. And then how do we expand out on that? And then how are they experiencing our product? So all of these things matter because we can't scale without it. We can't scale without nailing that product market fit. And so for me, kind of putting my growth operator hat on, I'm actually really like TLDR obsessed with user experience and who our users are. And I'm proud to be one of them.
Asif, if you've transitioned to event-based analytics, which I've been reading quite a bit about, but don't maybe quite understand yet, I'd love you to explain exactly what it is, and then talk about how you made that transition and how it's grown your app's audience. Yeah,
absolutely. Believe it or not, I've been doing this, been doing analytics for over 10 years, and digital for nearly 20. I had hair back then. Way back when, let's I think to answer that, I'm going to step back a little bit. When analytics started, it was very session-based, right? Everybody remembers Google Analytics and all of the likes, right? Where it's you start a session, you end a session, and we've been trained from the get-go to focus on metrics like that. Metrics, session-based. What does a user do, within a session? And for publishers, that's been the gold standard, right? How many sessions, session engagement, time on site, all of those metrics, it's ingrained within us.
DAOs, wows, and mows.
And then, absolutely, on top of that, there's layered on events, right? Oh, how many clicks to this, how many clicks to that, how many downloads? Absolutely. Those all, though, happen within a session, right? So a session is still important. And for the ad-supported space and publishers, it's still how many ad impressions per session, right? It's still a gold standard metric that everyone still talks about. So jumping to an event-based isn't so easy, right? It isn't so easy for us because our KPIs are built, right, on such, yes, call them, they're old, But those are the God metrics for certain organizations, right? So it's not as easy to say, oh, there's a new tool out, wonderful, I'm going to go use that now. Well, I can't change the way my business, the way we look at our business. Right, so it's different. So right now, we've taken a hybrid approach, absolutely. Look, we still focus on sessionizing, we still focus on when a user opens the app, what are they doing within the app, because that's the only way we're going to find out what it is that you're doing, and how can we do more of that, right? Because we want to help you recreate more of those sessions, because we know what you like. I'm going to try to give you more of that. All while using eventing based, right? All while still keeping in track of and measuring event-based metrics like how many downloads, how many clicks, how many people are subscribing, all of that. But long story short, there's still sessions haven't really gone away yet. Will they? Maybe, right? We're on a hybrid approach right now.
So when you're giving a report to an advertiser, are you including both of those?
Again, that's a really good question. Depends on who you ask, right? If it's an advertising agency or someone else that's keen on that sessionized metric, what is happening, page views per session, right? That's a really big metric, for those of you in the ad space, right? It's again, how many ads did I get to show that user in that experience? That's one of the God metrics that matters. But to a product person, UI, UX, and we're talking about, modals and usage of X, Y, and Z, absolutely, it's event-based, because they're not too concerned with the other things that are happening within that session. All they want to know is, are people using X, are people using Y? So it depends on who I check with.
All right, so Billy, before you were at Curio, you also worked with quite a few CEOs of the early stage startups. And so I was curious from your perspective, if you know of any pitfalls early stage startups should avoid, and maybe on the flip side too, some easy wins when they're getting started.
It's a fantastic question. So I think all startups have a lot of commonalities. Like we all hear the phrase, it's a startup. And yeah, you do share that in common. I think one of the other things that all of them share is that they're the baby of the founders. So that cult of personality is always going to be inherent in all of them. And so what you do with that cult is really important. So, this is where you talk about things like culture. Businesses are ultimately humans. So at the end of the day, like you really want to build a rich culture, as a founder, and you want to own that. And that really sets a really strong precedent, I think. So in terms of pitfalls, it's not addressing that from the beginning, because then you'll actually end up digging yourself out of a hole over time as you haven't established that ahead of time. I think that's, yeah.
All right, and we're moving into the next section, which is general questions. And I just again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. It's not supposed to be super formal. All right, so the first question is, I would love to understand sort of how you think about the mobile audience in terms of different variables like segmentation, behaviors, needs, and demographics. Megan, you want to kick that off?
Sure. So the mobile audience and mobile in-app is largely based off of gaming. So mobile games is a very big part of apps that get downloaded on a large basis every month. And the demographic usually that has been associated with mobile games is male, young, maybe not who I want to be engaging with, or they're, that's not exactly the people who we want from a branding or advertiser campaign for KPI. But what we've seen is that mobile gaming or gaming in general has become such a popular, it's no longer more of a niche, but becoming more of a mainstream way of really engaging with a high quality audience that is spending a tremendous amount of time, energy in that app and just connecting with the content and with other people. And because of that, that's shifted into more people playing more games. And we've seen that over the past couple of years as gaming has been on the rise. More people are downloading games, especially in casual and hyper casual. And with that comes a different audience. So women are actually, and I don't know about you guys, but I have been in the rabbit hole of gaming apps, hyper casual and casual. I would rather do that than doom scroll on my social media accounts. So I can speak from just my personal experience that I personally have gotten more into mobile games. And there's been, I think the stats now are 46% of US gamers and mobile are women. and they are head of household decision makers, and that has really shifted the way that agencies and advertisers think about connecting with their audience on a channel that historically they would have overlooked. They're now putting it as part of their omni-channel media plan, which is good to see.
I do my Wordle every day.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Billy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. For me, when I think about audiences, for us, we actually have a really even mix as well. Like we actually have, on any given day, 50% or more are female. And so, yeah, for us, like when I think about audiences, it's all about, pretty much finding the right ones, making sure that, we're giving them the best experience and making sure that we have the right channels so where we can find them. So I think this is where, just to kind of segue a little bit, this is where I'm seeing a lot of, I guess you could say, power coming from, especially like the exchanges and the demand side platforms, is that, for a long time, people have been talking about breaking away from Facebook and Google, and you were talking about, event-based. The reason why that's so important for people like Curio is that we can find the right audiences through these like really advanced channels. And I'm actually seeing that when you go to a lot of the like manual buys, you're not as, it's not as easy to directly find that right audience. Whereas if you go into the exchanges, the DSPs, you can. So I think I answered the question without answering it, but that's kind of my take.
All right, cool. And then wondering how you think about in-app advertising differently from some alternatives. Megan?
Yeah, so I mean, where I'm spending more of my time, and I mean, app marketers, they've inherently understood the value that advertising in-app does. It's people in-app are more likely to download and engage in app. So that's pretty clear. The event or the ways that you optimize to those tactics is very straightforward. On the branding side, you have, it's a bit of a disconnect where I'm trying to drive people to either in-store or brand awareness or website, and oftentimes there is a disconnect on how you can do that from the in-app space and measure it in the way that they need to. So I think there's been a lot of barriers to entry into in-app, which makes it more challenging to scale certain types of campaigns and advertisers who historically relied on desktop or video, out of home, things like that, as a way to get their brand message out. But I think, debugging a lot of those myths and ensuring that we support the standard measurement of whether it's OM SDK and we're passing the signals directly from the device at a very scalable way makes the measurement possible and makes those campaigns, scale seamlessly and within their overall tactic.
Okay. Targeting the right audience on mobile. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so obviously everything that's happening with Google and Apple, with privacy and the way in which we think about targeting users is changing. There is a fundamental shift in how you opt in to providing your personal identifier, your device ID. And that has significant implications to everybody, whether it's your audience targeting, whether it's how you measure, whether it's how you value, forecast, all of those things need to be rethought out of. And so that has put a lot of pressure on everybody to figure out solutions on alternatives, different ways of approaching audiences, different ways of measuring. So those that are in the space that are building out solutions for identity that are not based on Apple or Google identifiers, the Trade Desk's UID 2.0, for example, is one. LiveRamp has another. And so for us as the exchange, our role is to see where there are opportunities and scalable traction of these identifiers, and then make sure that we can support the passing of it for the advertisers that need it. And that's really where we sit in this. It's the enablement of measurement and the further discovery of solutions, whether it be in alternative identity or in different ways of targeting, specifically around contextual, which has also become a really popular buzzword in audience targeting.
And Billy, how do you guys find the right audiences?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. One is actually very practical. So no matter what channel you're looking at, like you really want to have the best creative possible. Like you want your creative to really speak to everyone. And especially now because of the fact that the industry's kind of, as Megan was saying, been blocked from a lot of tracking, you're reaching broader and broader audiences more and more. And so the better your creative is, the more it's aligned to your brand, the more it speaks to your audience, the better. The other thing is that
That's kind of like the inverse of where we used to be, right? It used to be
yeah, in a way
hyper-targeted
we've
creative.
taken 2 steps forward and 1 back, or I don't know, maybe the ratio is different, but we've definitely taken, there's definitely been hindrances, so to speak. But the thing is that we've seen this from the very beginning, like different channels perform differently based on the creative alone. And so we've really doubled down on that. It's very, very important. Like, again, as Asif was saying, like, every impression matters, and it really does. So that's number one, is we've actually tripled down on the best creative possible, because we're not able to track as well as we used to. So the second part is the tracking part. So for us, what we're doing, and actually what a lot of people in the industry are doing, is using web a lot more to proxy that tracking, so that we can get a better idea of what's performing on each channel. So on the one side, it's like the very right brain, just creative, and then on the left brain, in terms of tracking, we're using proxies to figure out, better and better, no matter which channel, using web in particular, the customer identity.
And so when you're, like, tactically speaking, so when we used to test creative, we would literally load all the results into a spreadsheet because it was all over the place. The analytics were all over the place. Are you still doing that?
It is a mix of, we're hybrid. So we actually have our in-house BI. We have a data team. We have a lot of analytical minds, operations, et cetera. And we're building a lot of dashboards internally that we really depend on. But let's face it, like, a lot of stuff is still tagged as organic. So at the end of the day, you have to, in my opinion, you have to use proxies, which in this case would be spreadsheets, just to get a better idea.
So painful.
Just adding to that a little bit, it's funny, right? Both those answers, how they indexed on data and analytics being the backbone, right? Everybody spoke about events, everybody spoke about, and then we even got to spreadsheets, right? Like, because you still can't get away from it. As the person that leads analytics for, a major publisher, yes, to this day, there are certain things that we still take it. But that's really the backbone, though. And I think what we're getting at is all of these challenges, right? And Megan mentioned the exact same challenge that I was having, is all the regulations. Absolutely, we love privacy. If done the right way, it can be successful. And we're living proof. At AccuWeather, our opt-in rates for IDFA, and maybe because that's who we are, right? People realize, how can I get my weather if I don't know how you to know where I am? Like, it just doesn't make sense, right? So maybe, for our use case is a little bit different. But the market is still challenged by the lack of the user's data. So they say, well, the user's now worth less because I know less about that user now, right? So I'm going to give you less for it, and that's the challenge. So we're coming up with data-driven solutions to say, okay, well, how do you challenge, when I'm getting paid less, what's the only other thing I can do? Spend less. So how do I spend less? Well, let's get smart with data, BI, data science, ML, right? And all of those things. So I really think that's really it, right? We're hunkering down on how to squeeze more juice out of this lemon.
Yeah.
And we're using data and analytics to kind of do that. Right?
Yeah. I mean, to piggyback off that, like, we, as Marcy was saying earlier, ad spend only increases, right? And it's only going to continue to increase. And we're no different at Curio. And the reason why, in my opinion, is because everyone is providing more value. So in the mid-funnel, the tracking is tough, but at the top of funnel, we're all users ourselves, right? So we provide a lot of value. We want to use valuable products. And so at the end of that funnel is your LTV, like how much value we're all providing. And so, yeah, like data analytics, definitely the backbone. And the reason why is because we're only going to spend more money. And we're trying to provide value from a product perspective to the right people who will have the highest LTV.
Okay. All right. So when you're thinking about setting up analytics inside your organization, what are the key ways that you can drive alignment with your analytics across talking to your CEO so he believes you, talking to your product guy, your CFO? How do you set that up? What are the key things that you do? Asif?
Happy to take that question. Those of you know me, I can chat data till I turn blue. The key thing is I always talk about the God metrics, right? I talk about the God metrics. You need to get alignment at the highest level of your organization about what are you driving towards, right? Agree on those top line, high level metrics. Is it ad impressions? Is it page views? Is it sessions? Is it X, Y, and Z, right? Is it conversion? If so, what conversion and what funnel, right? Get alignment and then pass that down, funnel that down to different organizations. Hey, product, how do you align to those God metrics? And product's going to have its own KPIs, right? But at the end of the day, you still have to align to that top level metrics. Hey, marketing, how are you going to drive towards, what are you measuring that is going to ultimately drive towards that conversion rate, right? So I know it's easy enough to say, right? Get alignment from the organization, right? But it's a lot harder, especially when you're coming into an organization, to say, hey, what do you measure and why, right? But I think you have to be in that position. And I'm really excited, honestly. I'm really excited that data and analytics is finally getting a seat at the table, right? Especially at executive level. So you can ask those uncomfortable questions about, are you sure you're measuring the right thing? Right? Because oftentimes, people aren't asking each other those questions, but they're still, they're still tracking it on a dashboard, on the KPI. It's on a spreadsheet, month after month, week after week. Reports are being sent. No action's being taken, or they even haven't looked at, So again, we were talking about sessions. Yeah, eventually we're going to have to talk about, should we still continue to look at the business this way, or should we look at a more event-based method? But somebody has to be there to ask that uncomfortable question, right? So
I found that if you're a growth organization, one of the top things that you can do to ensure growth is top of mind for everybody in the organization is you give everybody on your team a number. And you put it in their goals, and their bonus is tied to achieving that number. And you can filter all those numbers back up, and you can see what the organization is focusing on. And if that's not right, then we're doing the wrong stuff.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that, honestly. Like, it really starts with OKRs, in my opinion, right? Like, you have your OKRs, and then the KPIs branch down. And it is that simple. Like you said, it's that simple, but it's so hard to get right.
Yeah.
What's driving the movement from session to event-based?
Tooling, right? It's look, at the end of the day, when you talk about enterprise level analytics in the digital space, it's either Google Analytics or Adobe, right? That's pretty much it. IBM was a thing. Sorry.
Okay, boomer.
So, and that's it, right? And both those organizations are teetering away from session-based or event-based, right? And then absolutely, there's absolutely a place for Amplitude, Mixpanel, you name it, right? There's absolutely a place for that, when I talk about product analytics, UI, UX, they don't care about what's happening in the session, they want to know how different things are moving, right? So a lot of that is really tooling, but again, the businesses, right? Those of us that started in, dare I say, print publishing, right? We haven't gotten away from counting page views and impressions. That business has only evolved. That just went digital. Right? Newspapers, the editors didn't go away. They're still writing content. They're just publishing it on digital now, right? So the business in itself is still kind of the same. It's advertiser based. It's you create content, people come and they consume. How they do that has changed. So the business and the metrics behind the business hasn't changed. The tools are evolving though, right? So the tools are kind of dictating that, hey, you should also evolve. And we're like, whoa, not ready yet, right? We'll get there.
I'd love to know what your tech stack looks like for analytics in each of your organizations.
What our tech stack looks like. Well, AppLovin's tech stack is a series. We have our reporting system, which isn't always the most user-friendly. Like, we don't have a lot. It's just like really tapping into the data and being able to pull. You have to know what you want to pull. You need to understand why you're pulling data. Otherwise, you're going to look at a UI and you're like, I don't know what this data means to me. But But I think for us, everything is, there's a lot of back end, and we don't really have a lot of that kind of front end user experience for the internal of pulling of the data.
The domestication of information.
Yeah, it doesn't exist yet. I mean, like, it's kind of unclear. Like, does it make sense to invest a lot of time in building those tools out based on what it is that we're looking to do, which is, I mean, we have those kind of metrics that we look at, and it's all at the end of the day tied to, is this revenue positive? Like, are we making money? And that really is the only thing that matters, along with, are we doing it in the right way? But, it's not like we have a lot of dashboards that are pretty to look at.
Yeah. What you, Asif?
Acronym central, right? From CDPs to MMPs.
Okay, wait. You gotta say what that is, though.
Look, customer data platforms, right? Multi-measurement platforms, where we were talking about measurement in user acquisition. One of the key things, obviously, if you're spending money acquiring users, is to be able to measure those users properly, right, where they're coming from. Luckily, we have some wonderful vendors out there that help us with that, especially in the app acquisition space. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to drop names now. No plugs. And obviously, you have your event-based analytics, depending on who or your sessionized based. So you have your what I call enterprise analytics, right? That's what the business looks at at a high level. Then you have departmentalized analytics, which is marketing might want to look at something, product might want to look at something else. So yeah, it's really, you name it, we've got it.
Let me ask a question. So, you talked about your content strategy to keep people sticky and in your app. So how do you measure that part of it?
Easy, sessionized, right? What are you looking at within that session? When you, in the morning, wake up, you open the app, you started your session, right? Depending on, how long your session duration is, et cetera, et cetera. What are you consuming, right? What are you reading? What are you watching? All of those things are being measured. And we're looking at it as a session-based instead of an event-based. Instead of saying 5,000 videos were watched, we're going, who watched them? Within that session, what else did they do when they watched that video, right? We build that sessionized experience helps us build context versus just bean counting, right? 5,000 videos, 30,000 page views, et cetera, et cetera. Sessionization helps pile all of that together, and then, right? And then we can look at all of those, session level data and say, what are the commonalities, right? Again, maybe it's different because AccuWeather, who doesn't need weather, right? We cater to everyone, right? There isn't you're a gamer and that's the app you use, right? Or you're a car guy and that's what you do. You're into home decorations or that's what we're very, very broad. So for us to understand and add as much context as possible is absolutely key.
Okay. What about you, Billy?
Yeah, so I've been mulling this one. Because,
I didn't write these ahead of time.
Yeah, I was defaulting to just like being broad and just talking about the things that we connect, but I think the audience will probably find the most value if I just name drop. So I've tried every tool out there, right? Like I've done Tableau, Looker, et cetera. So let's just talk about my favorites, so to speak. And so I'm a huge fan of RevenueCat. All the MMPs are doing great things. So I'll leave that one alone, but the ones I've tried the most are AppsFlyer, Adjust, and Kochava. And we know Singular is doing great things in Branch, et cetera, et cetera. And then in terms of other things, Google Analytics is still great. Google Tag Manager is still great. And all of these things, the one I'm going to plug the most is, I would say, Looker, and some companies will use Datadog, et cetera. But my personal favorite from a user experience is Looker. So ingesting all of that data from your different vendors or third parties, let's say, into Looker. That's my favorite.
Looker, okay. I love Power BI, it's my favorite. All right, anyway, moving on. Okay, economics of mobile acquisition. I'd love to hear a little bit about how those are changing. And maybe even in recency, like in the last year, how has that changed? Asif?
Everything that we spoke about so far, right? Value of the audience has declined. Hyper-focused on ensuring that we are acquiring users very, very surgically versus in the past, maybe we're a little bit more lax and said, let's try a few things, right? This year, we're going to try a few things. We're going to diversify. Right now, it's hunker down and really surgically focus on what worked. Let's try that again. Let's absolutely keep testing and learning, right? So it's a test and learn mentality where you're constantly evolving. But the most important thing I do believe right now for us in the acquisition space is thinking beyond the 30, 60 lifetime value of the user, right? And I think we fall trap because of some of the tools by default give you a 30, 60, 90-day lifetime value. Well, guess what? A user sticks around to your app, hopefully, right? Your power users beyond that 90, right? And if you're really after monetizing and understanding, you need a long-term lifetime, and you need to actually understand and give your own lifetime, not just what the tool said you should, right? It's not 30, 60, or 90. So for us, when I acquire, I don't just look at what is this user going to do for me in the 30 or 60 or 90. I have to say, I can buy this user, right? Acquire this user at this rate, and I might not recoup in 30, 60, or 90. I need to plan that, right? I might recoup this over 12, 18 months, depending on what the platform ad rates and what I'm getting for this user. So it's going beyond the generic lifetime value of the user, and actually that's helping with two things, right? The other thing that's helping with is it's helping set expectations from from executive level, right? To say, look, I'm going to need X on user acquisition, but I will make it back within Y, right? And when you say that, and you can actually put numbers down, it helps with securing funds, right? Versus looking at a much shorter time frame.
Love that answer. Any questions from the audience as we wrap? None? All right. Well, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.